Since Barack Obama was elected the 44th President of the United States 12 days ago, he's largely remained out of sight, getting high-level government briefings and conferring with his transition team. But he surfaced on Friday afternoon in Chicago, along with his wife Michelle, to give us his first post-election interview. It covers a wide range of subjects, including the economy, the ailing automobile industry, the government's $700 billion bailout program, their visit to the White House, the emotions of election night, and the quest for a family dog. You'll hear all of it. But we begin with the president-elect and his thoughts about the new job. So here we are.
Here we are.
How's your life changed in the last 10 days?
Well, I tell you what, there seem to be more people hovering around me. That's for sure. On the other hand, I'm sleeping in my own bed over the last 10 days, which is quite a treat. Michelle always wakes up earlier than I do, so listen to her roaming around and having the girls come in and jump in your bed. It's a great feeling. Yeah.
Has this been easier than the campaign trail?
Well, it's different. I think that during the campaign, it is just a constant, frenetic forward momentum. Here, I'm stationary, but the issues come to you, and we've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of problems, a lot of big challenges.
Have there been moments when you've said, "What did I get myself into?"
Surprisingly enough, I feel right now that I'm doing what I should be doing. That gives me a certain sense of calm. I will say that the challenges that we're confronting are enormous, and they're multiple. And so there are times during the course of a given day where you think, where do I start?
What have you been concentrating on this week?
A couple of things. Number one, I think it's important to get a national security team in place because transition periods are potentially times of vulnerability to terrorist attack. We want to make sure that there is as seamless a transition on national security as possible. Obviously, the economy, talking to top economic advisors about how we're going to create jobs, how we get the economy back on track, and what do we do in terms of some long-term issues like energy and healthcare, and how do we sequence those things in a way that we can actually get things through Congress.
Are you in sync with Secretary Paulson in terms of how the $700 billion is being used?
Well, look, Hank Paulson has worked tirelessly under some very difficult circumstances. We've got an unprecedented crisis, or at least something that we have not seen since the Great Depression. And I think Hank would be the first one to acknowledge that probably not everything that's been done has worked the way he had hoped it would work. But I'm less interested in looking backwards than I am in looking forwards.
The government has spent almost $300 billion out of the TARP program, right, the money that was set aside to help the financial industry. And nothing much has changed. If you look at it, nothing much has changed. Why? It's $300 billion. Why is that?
I think that part of the way to think about it is things could be worse. I mean, we could have seen a lot more bank failures over the last several months. We could have seen an even more rapid deterioration of the economy, even a bigger drop in the stock market. So part of what we have to measure against is what didn't happen, not just what has happened. Having said that, there's no doubt that we have not been able yet to reset the confidence in the financial markets and in the consumer markets and among businesses that allow the economy to move forward in a strong way. And my job as president is going to be to make sure that we restore that confidence.
Once you become president, are there things that you'll change?
Well, I think we still have to see how this thing unfolds over the next couple of months. One area that I'm concerned about, and I've said this publicly, is we have not focused on foreclosures and what's happening to homeowners as much as I would like. We have the tools to do it. We've got to set up a negotiation between banks and borrowers so that people can stay in their homes. That is going to have an impact on the economy as a whole. And one thing I'm determined is that if we don't have a clear, focused program for homeowners by the time I take office, we will after I take office.
Are you being consulted by Secretary Paulson? Is he telling you what's going on?
You know, what we've done is we've assigned somebody on my transition team who interacts with them on a daily basis. And we are getting the information that's required and we're making suggestions in some circumstances about how we think they might approach some of these problems.
Are they listening?
Well, we'll find out.
People are comparing this to 1932.
Right.
Is that a valid comparison, do you think?
Well, keep in mind that 1932, 1933, the unemployment rate was 25%, inching up to 30%. You had a third of the country that was ill-housed, ill-clothed, unemployed. We're not going through something comparable to that. But I would say that this is as bad as we've seen since then. And if we don't take some significant steps, then it could get worse.
You have a situation right now where you have General Motors, which is in dire straits, may run out of cash by the end of the year, maybe by the end of, certainly if we believe what we read in the papers, by the time you take office.
Right. Well, let's see how this thing plays itself out. For the auto industry to completely collapse would be a disaster in this kind of environment, not just for individual families, but the repercussions across the economy would be dire. So it's my belief that we need to provide assistance to the auto industry. But I think that it can't be a blank check. So my hope is that over the course of the next week, between the White House and Congress, the discussions are shaped around providing assistance, but making sure that that assistance is conditioned on labor, management, suppliers, lenders, all the stakeholders coming together with a plan. What does a sustainable U.S. auto industry look like, so that we are creating a bridge loan to somewhere as opposed to a bridge loan to nowhere? And that's, I think, what you haven't yet seen. That's something that I think we're going to have to come up with.
There are a lot of people that think that the country would probably be better off, and General Motors might be better off if it was allowed to go into bankruptcy.
Well, under normal circumstances, that might be the case, in the sense that you'd go through a restructuring, like the airlines had to do in some cases, and then they come out and they're still a viable operation, and they're operating even during the course of bankruptcy. In this situation, you could see the spigot completely shut off, so that it would not potentially permit GM to get back on its feet. And I think that what we have to do is to recognize that these are extraordinary circumstances. Banks aren't lending as it is. They're not even lending to businesses that are doing well, much less businesses that are doing poorly. And in that circumstance, the usual options may not be available.
When the price of oil was at $147 a barrel, there were a lot of spirited and profitable discussions that were held on energy independence. Now you've got the price of oil under $60.
Right.
Does doing something about energy, is it less important now than it was?
It's more important. It may be a little harder politically, but it's more important.
Why?
Well, because this has been our pattern, is we go from shock to trance. Oil prices go up, gas prices at the pump go up, everybody goes into a flurry of activity, and then the prices go back down, and suddenly we act like it's not important, and we start filling up our SUVs again, and as a consequence, we never make any progress. It's part of the addiction, right? That has to be broken. Now's the time to break it.
Where is all the money going to come from to do all of these things, and is there a point where just going to the Treasury Department and printing more of it ceases to be an option?
Look, I think what's interesting about the time that we're in right now is that you actually have a consensus among conservative, Republican-leaning economists and liberal, left-leaning economists. And the consensus is this, that we have to do whatever it takes to get this economy moving again. That we're going to have to spend money now to stimulate the economy, and that we shouldn't worry about the deficit next year or even the year after. That short term, the most important thing is that we avoid a deepening recession.
How high a priority are you placing on re-regulations of the financial markets?
I think it's a top priority. I think that we have to restore a sense of trust, transparency, openness in our financial system. And keep in mind that the deregulation process, it wasn't just one party. I think there's a lot of blame to spread around, but hopefully everybody's learned their lesson. And the answer is not heavy-handed regulations that crush the entrepreneurial spirit and risk-taking of American capitalism. That's what's made our economy great. But it is to restore a sense of balance.
His first legislative goal will be to get Congress to pass an economic stimulus package that he hopes will create jobs and put money in the pockets of ordinary citizens. Construction programs to shore up the nation's creaky infrastructure, a tax cut for the middle class, and his first initiatives on health care. But some things he can do with the stroke of a pen. There are a number of different things that you could do early pertaining to executive orders.
Right.
One of them is to shut down Guantanamo Bay. Mm-hmm. Another is to change interrogation methods that are used by U.S. troops. Are those things that you plan to take early action on?
Yes. I have said repeatedly that I intend to close Guantanamo, and I will follow through on that. I've said repeatedly that America doesn't torture, and I'm going to make sure that we don't torture. Those are part and parcel of an effort to regain America's moral stature in the world.
Can you give us some sense of when you might start redeployments out of Iraq?
Well, I've said during the campaign, and I stick to this commitment, that as soon as I take office, I will call in the Joint Chiefs of Staff, my national security apparatus, and we will start executing a plan that draws down our troops. Particularly in light of the problems that we're having in Afghanistan, which has continued to worsen. We've got to shore up those efforts. Where does capturing or killing Osama bin Laden fall? I think it is a top priority for us to stamp out al-Qaeda once and for all. And I think capturing or killing bin Laden is a critical aspect of stamping out al-Qaeda. He is not just a symbol, he's also the operational leader of an organization that is planning attacks against U.S. targets. How close are you to settling on a cabinet? Well, I think that I've got a pretty good idea of what I'd like to see, but it takes some time to work those things through. When are you going to make your first announcements? Soon. Next week? Soon. You met with Senator Clinton this week? I did. Is she on the short list for a cabinet position? You know, she is somebody who I needed advice and counsel from. She is one of the most thoughtful public officials that we have. Beyond that, you're not getting anything out of me, Steve. Will there be Republicans in the cabinet? Yes. More than one? You're not getting any more out of me. You've spoken to some former presidents. I have. Any advice, any good advice they gave you? You know, they were all incredibly gracious, but I think that all of them recognize that there's a certain loneliness to the job. That, you know, you'll get advice and you'll get counsel. Ultimately, you're the person who's going to be making decisions. And I think that even now, you know, you can already feel that fact. What are you reading right now? Briefing papers. A lot of briefing papers? Yeah. I've been spending a lot of time reading Lincoln. There's a wisdom there and a humility about his approach to government, even before he was president, that I just find very helpful. Put a lot of his political enemies in his cabinet. He did. Is that something you're considering? Well, I tell you what, I find him a very wise man. Have you been reading anything about the Depression, anything about FDR? You know, I have, actually. There's a new book out about FDR's first 100 days. And what you see in FDR that I hope my team can emulate is not always getting it right, but projecting a sense of confidence and a willingness to try things and experiment in order to get people working again. And I think that that's what the American people expect. You know, they're not expecting miracles. I think if you talk to the average person right now, they would say, well, look, we're having a tough time right now. We've had tough times before, and we don't expect that a new president can snap his fingers and suddenly everything's going to be okay. But what we do expect is that the guy's going to be straight with us. We do expect that he's going to be working really hard for us. We do expect that he's going to be thinking about ordinary Americans and not just the wealthy and the powerful. And we do expect that if something doesn't work, that they're going to try something else until they find something that does. And that's the kind of common sense approach that I want to take when I take office.
There's been talk on Capitol Hill, and a number of Democratic congressmen have proposed programs that are part of sort of a New Deal. Right. The possibility of reviving agencies like the Home Ownership Loan Corporation.
Right. Two points I'd make on this. Number one, although there are some parallels to the problems that we're seeing now and what we saw back in the 30s, no period is exactly the same. And for us to simply recreate what existed back in the 30s in the 21st century, I think would be missing the boat. We've got to come up with solutions that are true to our times and true to this moment, and that's going to be our job. I think the basic principle that government has a role to play in kickstarting an economy that has ground to a halt is sound. I think our basic principle that this is a free market system and that has worked for us, that it creates innovation and risk-taking, I think that's a principle that we've got to hold to as well. But what I don't want to do is get bottled up in a lot of ideology and, is this conservative or liberal? My interest is finding something that works. And whether it's coming from FDR or it's coming from Ronald Reagan, if the idea is right for the times, then we're going to apply it. And things that don't work, we're going to get rid of.
Are you going to make a lot of speeches? Are you going to talk a lot to the American people? You're going to go on television and radio and...
I'm not sure that the American people are looking for a lot of speeches. I think what they're looking for is action. But one of the things that I do think is important is to be able to explain to the American people what you're doing and why you're doing it. That is something that I think every great president has been able to do, from FDR to Lincoln to John Kennedy to Eisenhower. I think that they were people who were able to say, here's the direction we're going, here's why I think it's important, here are the possible dangers or challenges, but ultimately, this is going to lead us to a better America. And I want to make sure that I can recreate a bond of trust between the presidency and the public that I think has been lost.
The President-elect and Mrs. Obama have already been on a tour of their new home. And when we come back, they talk about the challenges and the excitement of moving into the most famous address in the world.